Welcome back. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to Retail Horror Stories. Hit the like button and drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. That way, YouTube knows to keep showing you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. I was 19 when I started working at RadioShack. It wasn't glamorous, but it was one of the few places in town still hiring. The store sat tucked in a half-abandoned strip mall, wedged between a shuttered Blockbuster and a pawn shop that kept its lights on 24 hours a day. Most people didn't even realize we were still open. I was the new guy, so I got stuck with the closing shifts. That meant long hours of silence under humming fluorescent lights, with the faint smell of dust and plastic hanging in the air. I didn't mind at first. The quiet was comforting. I could stock shelves at my own pace, reorganize the endless bins of wires, and listen to the faint buzz of televisions left on display mode. But then came the night of the radio. It was 10 minutes before closing when he walked in. A man with wild, wiry hair and a jacket that looked like it had been worn for decades. He carried a battered portable radio in his arms, the kind with the silver antenna bent at the middle. The thing looked older than me, its buttons worn smooth, its speaker grill cracked. He set it on the counter with a soft thunk. His hands shook slightly as he pushed it toward me. "Can you fix this?" he asked. His voice was gravelly, like he'd been smoking since childhood. I opened my mouth to say no, but something about his stare, those eyes, sunken but sharp, made me nod. "I can try." He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "It only works at night. Don't leave it on too long." Before I could ask what that meant, he turned and shuffled out the door, leaving me alone with the broken thing. I should have tossed it in the backroom bin and forgotten about it. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I locked the doors, turned off most of the lights, and sat behind the counter with the radio. The silence of the empty store pressed down on me, broken only by the faint hum of old televisions cycling their demos. I plugged the radio into the wall and flipped the switch. Instantly, the speakers erupted with static. Not the soft, fuzzy hiss you'd expect, but a violent crackle like a thunderstorm had burst open inside the store. It was so loud I winced, reaching to turn it down. But then I heard it beneath the noise. Syllables. At first, I thought I imagined it. The human brain tries to find patterns in chaos, right? But the longer I listened, the clearer it became. Shh. I froze. My last name is Chamber. Cham Bear. I leaned closer, my skin prickling. The static was shaping itself into words. "He's behind you." My stomach dropped. I whipped around in my chair so fast I nearly fell. But the store was empty. The aisles stretched out under buzzing lights, shadows pooling at the corners. Nothing moved. I turned back to the radio. My hands shook as I yanked the cord from the outlet. The static died instantly, leaving me in suffocating silence. I laughed nervously, trying to convince myself it was just interference, some freak alignment of signals. Radios picked up weird things all the time, right? But then I heard another sound, a low buzz. I turned my head slowly. Every radio in the store, dozens of them stacked neatly in rows, boxed and unboxed, had turned on. Their speakers lit with a faint glow, humming faint static that grew louder with each passing second. None of them were plugged in. None of them were connected to power. Yet, one by one, they flickered alive, until the entire store vibrated with the sound. The noise swelled, filling the aisles, rattling the glass doors, vibrating in my chest. I staggered back, clutching my ears as the static twisted itself into voices. "He's behind you. He's behind you. He's behind you." The voices were synchronized now, chanting, layered on top of one another. Dozens of voices, men, women, children, all whispering the same words. I bolted toward the front doors, fumbling with my keys. My hands shook so badly that the keys slipped, clattering onto the tile. I dropped to my knees, scrambling to grab them as the sound behind me built to a roar. And then, silence. Every radio shut off at once. The sudden absence of sound was worse than the noise. The store felt hollow, as though the air had been sucked out. My own breathing sounded deafening. That's when I felt it. A breath on the back of my neck. "Too late," a voice whispered. I spun around, flashlight raised like a weapon. The beam cut across aisles of cords, batteries, and half-dead electronics. Empty. Nothing but my own pale reflection staring back at me from dark TV screens. My chest heaved. Sweat trickled down my back. I didn't wait. I grabbed my bag, wrenched the lock open, and fled into the night. The next morning, I told my manager what happened. She laughed, shaking her head. "Old equipment bleeds signals sometimes," she said. "Ghost frequencies. Don't spook yourself. Probably some trucker's CB radio bouncing into the system." But her explanation didn't calm me, because CB radios don't breathe on your neck, and static doesn't know your name. Still, I forced myself to return the next evening. Rent was due and I couldn't afford to lose the job. I was sweeping the floor near closing when I noticed something strange. The battered radio the old man had left? It was gone. I hadn't moved it. No one else had the keys. That's when I looked up and saw him. The old man was standing outside the locked glass doors. He wasn't carrying the radio anymore. His hands dangled limp at his sides. He didn't blink, didn't move. Just stared straight at me with that same wide smile. The hairs on my arms rose. I backed slowly toward the counter, not daring to look away. And then I heard it. The static. Faint at first, like wind through a tunnel, seeping in from the corners of the store. It grew louder, rattling the fluorescent lights above me, vibrating the glass panes until they shuddered in their frames. I looked back at the doors. The old man was gone, but his reflection remained. Panic clawed at me. I ran to the counter, snatching up the phone to call 911. But instead of a dial tone, all I heard was static. "Chamber," the voice crooned through the receiver. "We see you." I slammed it down, heart pounding. The radios lit up again, one by one, their red standby lights glowing in the dim store, like hundreds of tiny eyes blinking awake. The static roared. The chant began anew. "He's behind you. He's behind you. He's behind you." I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I sprinted to the back room, shoved myself inside, and slammed the door. But the static didn't stop. It seeped through the walls, shaking the shelves, vibrating the floor beneath me. I curled into the corner, clutching my knees, whispering to myself that it wasn't real, that it couldn't hurt me. And then, in the darkness, another sound joined the static. A voice. Not through the radios, not through the walls, inside the room, with me. Too late. When I opened my eyes, it was morning. The store lights were on. The radios were silent. The front doors stood unlocked, sunlight spilling across the linoleum floor. I don't know how I got there. I don't know what happened. But when my manager walked in, she found me curled in the corner of the back room, clutching my own arm so hard my nails had drawn blood. And on the inside of my arm, traced faintly in bruised red marks, were the words, "He's behind you." Working at RadioShack, you get used to people coming in just to mess with the display models. Kids would hammer buttons on the demo phones, try to play games, and then complain when the screen froze. We used to joke that half our shift was just rebooting demo units and wiping fingerprints off screens. But one night, I found a phone that didn't want to be wiped clean. It was a slow evening, the kind where the store felt more like a mausoleum than a business. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that sterile yellow glow across aisles of coiled cables and dusty boxes. I had just finished helping a guy buy batteries for a garage door opener when a teenager wandered in, backpack slung over one shoulder. He walked straight to the cell phone display, ignoring me completely. That wasn't unusual. People liked to pretend we didn't exist unless they needed a discount. I went about straightening shelves, keeping an eye on him out of habit. After a few minutes, I heard him mutter, "That's weird." I glanced over. He was staring at one of the demo phones, his brow furrowed. "Everything good?" I asked. He didn't look up. I think this phone has pictures on it." That caught my attention. Demo phones were locked down tight. They weren't supposed to have personal files, just stock wallpapers and fake apps. I walked over and leaned in. He tilted the phone toward me. Sure enough, the gallery app was open. Rows of images filled the screen, grainy, blurry photographs. At first, I thought they were old test shots, but then my stomach dropped. The pictures weren't random, they were of him. Different angles, different moments. Some taken from across the aisle, others close up. The most recent photo showed him standing in front of the exact display we were at now, his hand frozen mid-swipe. He stared at me, pale. How is that possible? I grabbed the phone, heart pounding. It's probably just some glitch. Maybe they reused a unit. But my explanation was weak and we both knew it. I scrolled further. More photos appeared, and then I froze. The next image wasn't of him. It was of me. Taken from behind the counter just minutes earlier. I was bent over a box, restocking batteries, completely unaware. The teenager whispered, "Dude, someone's messing with us." I tapped back to the gallery's main page. The folder name read LIVE. I tried to exit the gallery, but the phone locked itself with a loud click. The screen dimmed, showing a black reflection of our faces in the glass. We both jumped as the phone buzzed in my hand. An incoming call. The ID read, "Unknown." The ringtone was faint, distorted, almost like static leaking through a tunnel. Without thinking, I answered. "Hello?" There was silence, then a faint hiss, and finally a whisper. "We see you." I hung up immediately, shoving the phone back on the display stand. The teenager looked like he was about to bolt. I forced a laugh. It's probably a prank app. People hack these things all the time. But my voice shook. He left soon after, practically running out the door. I stayed behind, trying to convince myself it was nothing. But as I was locking up, I glanced back at the display. The phone's screen was on again. It showed the camera app. The lens was aimed directly at me, and I swear, just before the screen went black, it blinked. I went home that night uneasy, but I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? For a few days, everything seemed normal. The phone was gone from the display, probably swapped out. I started to think I had imagined it, maybe spooked myself after too many late nights alone in that empty store. But then the calls started. The first one came at 2:17 a.m. My phone lit up on the nightstand, buzzing angrily. The caller ID read unknown. I almost didn't answer, but half asleep I swiped the screen. Hello? Nothing but static. I hung up, rolled over, and told myself it was spam. The second night it rang again. Same time, same number. This time I didn't answer. But when I looked at my call log later, I noticed something strange. The number wasn't listed as unknown anymore. It was listed as in-store demo. By the third night, I was terrified to even look at my phone. I left it face down on the nightstand, but right at 2:17, it vibrated again. I forced myself not to touch it. The ringing stopped after a minute. Relief washed over me until the phone lit up on its own. The screen displayed the gallery app, and there, at the top of the roll, was a brand new photo. It was of me, asleep in my own bed. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. I sat awake, staring at the phone, waiting for the next call. At work the next day, I told my manager what had happened. She rolled her eyes. It's probably just malware. Stop scaring yourself and reset your phone. But it wasn't my phone. That was the part she didn't understand. The calls didn't come from my device. They came from that demo unit. And no matter what I did, I couldn't block the number. I even tried smashing my SIM card and getting a new one. It didn't matter. At 2:17 a.m., the calls returned. One night, I snapped. I decided to go back to the store after hours, break into the display and destroy the phone for good. The strip mall was deserted. I used my key to slip inside, the silence pressing heavy. I walked straight to the display counter. The demo phones gleamed under the security lights lined up neatly like soldiers. Only one was powered on. The same one. Its screen lit up as I approached, camera facing me. The gallery opened automatically, and I saw the photos. Hundreds of them. Not just of me anymore. Customers, co-workers, random people who had wandered into the store over the years. All of them captured at angles that didn't make sense. Photos from above, below, behind. Angles no phone on a counter could ever take. My hands shook as I picked it up. The screen glowed faintly, the gallery scrolling on its own. The last photo stopped me cold. It was of the parking lot outside. A figure stood there, facing the store. Blurry, indistinct, but unmistakably watching. Behind me, the store phone rang. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the empty space. I turned slowly, dread filling my chest. The display phone in my hand buzzed. Incoming call. The ID read unknown. Against every instinct, I answered. Static filled my ear. Then, the faint click of a camera shutter. I dropped the phone, heart hammering. It landed screen up on the tile, and I saw the newest photo appear in the gallery. It was me, standing inside the store, holding the phone. And just over my shoulder, barely visible in the frame, someone else, smiling. Working late at RadioShack had a rhythm to it. By the time the sun went down and the last customer trickled out, the store seemed to take on its own personality. The buzzing of fluorescent lights became a heartbeat. The aisles of dusty boxes and tangled wires felt less like retail stock and more like forgotten artifacts. And the television wall, that towering display of screens meant to lure shoppers, became the eyes of the store. I hated closing shifts, not because of the boredom, but because of those screens. The television wall sat at the far end of the store. It was an array of 20 or so TVs, stacked 3 high and 7 across, each angled slightly so customers could compare their brightness and picture quality. During the day, they played the same looping demo, rolling landscapes, cartoonish animals, sometimes a stock reel of people laughing over barbecues. But at night, when the demo loop shut off, the screens turned black. And when you walked by, your reflection followed you across every screen, fractured into dozens of pale ghosts staring back. One night, near closing, I noticed something strange. I had just finished sweeping the aisle when I realized one screen on the wall wasn't off. The others were pitch black, reflecting the dim aisles, but the second screen from the left on the bottom row glowed faintly. I set the broom aside and stepped closer. The TV showed security footage. Grainy, washed out, the kind of footage you'd expect from an old camera. The angle was from above, aimed at the store entrance. The timestamp in the corner made my stomach tighten. October 14th, 2029. That was 5 years in the future. At first, I thought maybe the feed was live and the timestamp glitched. I squinted at the screen. The footage showed the front doors, still locked, the parking lot beyond them empty and bathed in pale orange light. And then, movement. A woman walked past the frame, keys jangling at her side. She looked exhausted, hair pulled back in a messy bun, jacket hanging loosely off her shoulders. It was me. Older, but unmistakably me. My hands trembled as I reached for the power button. The screen flickered, went black, and then blinked back on. This time, the angle had changed. Now it showed the television wall, the very same wall I was standing in front of. And there I was, on screen, staring at myself. But the me on the TV wasn't moving in sync. She looked a little older, her face drawn, shadows deep under her eyes. She turned her head, glancing off to the side as though hearing something. I whipped my head in the same direction. Nothing. When I looked back at the TV, she was closer to the camera, her face filling the screen. Her mouth moved silently, forming words I couldn't hear. I scrambled backward, tripping over the broom. My reflection vanished into the swarm of black screens, but the glowing one stayed lit, showing the older version of me pressing her hand against the glass, mouthing the same phrase again and again. Finally, I understood it. Don't look outside. Of course I did. Through the reflection of the screens, I saw movement at the glass doors. A shadow stood there, tall and featureless, framed by the flickering parking lot lights. It didn't move closer. It didn't knock. It just lingered, waiting. I spun back to the television. The image of myself was gone. The screen now showed static, but faintly, beneath the hiss, came a whisper. "Don't let him in." I should have run then, should have grabbed my bag and bolted out the back. But some awful curiosity rooted me to the spot. The other televisions began to flicker on, one by one. Not with the demo loop, but with different feeds. One screen showed the stockroom, another the service counter, another the bathroom hallway. All of them grainy, all stamped with dates years ahead. And in each one, I saw myself. Sometimes older, sometimes younger, but always there, always alone. In one, I was mopping the floors with hair streaked gray. In another, I was kneeling in the stockroom, face buried in my hands. In another, I was lying on the floor in front of the counter, eyes wide open, completely still. I stumbled backward, my heart slamming against my ribs. The sound of static grew louder, spilling from every speaker. And then, all the screens switched at once. The shadow. The tall, featureless figure stood in every frame, in every angle of the store. Closer now, almost inside. I screamed and bolted for the back room. The static followed me, a chorus of hissing voices leaking from every TV. I slammed the door shut and fumbled with the lock, though I knew it was pointless. The walls buzzed with electricity, the air heavy like a storm pressing down. I sank into the corner, covering my ears, whispering to myself that it wasn't real, that I was hallucinating. But then the backroom computer screen flickered on by itself. The monitor glowed with the same security footage. And there I was, on the screen again, huddled in the corner, exactly as I was now. Only in the video, the door behind me was slowly creaking open. I spun around, the door was shut. When I looked back at the screen, the figure had entered. It loomed over the version of me in the footage, its shape blotting out the light, its head tilting unnaturally. And the me on the screen looked up, eyes wide with terror. The static built to a scream. The lights above me shattered, raining glass. I covered my head, heart in my throat. When I dared to look again, the monitor was black. The next thing I remember is waking up on the floor. Morning light streamed through the stockroom door. The store was silent. The television wall was dark. I told my manager I'd fallen and knocked myself out. I didn't dare explain the rest, but every night since I've had the same dream. I'm standing in front of the television wall, older, hair streaked with gray, whispering words I can't quite hear. My reflection mouths them over and over, but the sound never comes through. And just outside the glass doors, the shadow waits, always waiting. I always loved tinkering with old electronics, which is probably why I ended up working at RadioShack in the first place. Half our customers were hobbyists looking for replacement parts for machines nobody made anymore. Radios, walkie-talkies, ham gear. The stuff was practically junk to most people, but some swore by it. That's how I found the CB radio. It was shoved onto the clearance shelf near the back, coated in a film of dust like it hadn't been touched in years. The tag said $5. I couldn't resist. I bought it at the end of my shift, carried it home, and set it on my desk. The box was yellowed, the manual missing, but the radio itself looked intact. I plugged it in, ran the antenna up by my window, and waited. At first, all I got was static. But that was the fun part, turning the dials, scanning channels, listening for the random chatter of truckers rolling across highways in the dead of night. You could hear all kinds of strange conversations if you tuned just right. That night, though, I found something else. It was just past midnight when the static shifted. At first, I thought it was nothing, just interference. But then, beneath the hiss, I heard something faint. "Help!" I froze, leaning closer. "Please! Someone! Help!" The voice was distorted, crackling through like it was fighting against the static, but there was no mistaking the fear in it. I adjusted the dial, trying to sharpen the signal. The voice cut in clearer. "They're coming!" "He's coming. Oh God, he's..." The feed erupted into shrieking noise, like metal grinding against metal. I yanked back, heart pounding. When it cleared, the voice was gone. I sat there for nearly an hour, scanning the channels again, hoping to hear it return. Just as I was about to give up, the voice came back, louder this time. Dash, coordinates, write them down, hurry! I scrambled for a pen. The numbers came through jagged, broken by static, but I managed to jot them down. When I typed them into Google Maps, my stomach knotted. The coordinates pointed to an alley behind my own RadioShack. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in my apartment made me jump. By morning, I convinced myself it had been some weird prank. Someone with a powerful rig messing with anyone listening. That had to be it. But when I got to work, something was wrong. The alley behind the store was blocked off. Yellow police tape stretched across the entrance, flapping in the breeze. 2 patrol cars sat parked by the dumpster, their lights off but their presence heavy. I asked my manager what had happened. She shrugged. Probably another vagrant. You know how it is back there. But the way the officers looked at the ground, like they couldn't quite bring themselves to meet each other's eyes, told me it wasn't that simple. That night, I couldn't resist. I powered the CB back on. Static filled the room for hours. I was about to shut it off when the voice returned. This time, it was frantic. They didn't find him. They never find him. He's still out there. Who? I whispered, leaning close. The voice cracked, like the speaker was right on the edge of breaking. The man in the static. Before I could respond, the feed collapsed into shrieks again, loud enough to rattle the glass in my window. I didn't touch the radio for a week. But one night, coming back from a late shift, I found it switched on by itself. The dial glowed faintly in the dark apartment, static humming low like a whisper. And then, a voice. Not through the speaker this time. Behind me, I spun around, heart in my throat. The room was empty. But when I turned back to the radio, I realized the voice was coming through. It just wasn't distorted anymore. It was clear, too clear. "Why didn't you listen?" it asked. I knocked the radio off my desk. It clattered to the floor, still buzzing. The dial spun on its own, flipping through channels. Each station bled with faint whispers, dozens of voices overlapping. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the voices only grew louder. They were all saying the same thing. Coordinates, different ones this time. I couldn't help myself. I wrote them down. The new coordinates pointed to a stretch of woods just outside town. The next day, curiosity got the better of me. I drove out there, following winding dirt roads until I reached the spot. At first, it looked like nothing. Just trees, branches, a clearing where the sun barely filtered through. Then I saw the ditch. And inside it, something metal. I brushed the dirt away. It was another CB radio, older, rusted, half buried, the antenna bent like the one I'd bought. My stomach dropped. When I looked up, I thought I saw movement between the trees, a tall, pale figure standing perfectly still, watching. I ran back to my car and didn't look back. That night, I threw the radio in the dumpster behind my apartment building. I thought it was over. But at 2:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of static. Not from my desk, from my nightstand. I turned my head slowly. The radio was back. Perfectly clean, perfectly intact, its dial glowing faintly in the darkness. And from the speaker, one voice, calm, steady. "You can't get rid of me. I don't sleep much anymore. Every night at 2:17, the radio turns on by itself. Sometimes it gives me coordinates, sometimes it just whispers my name. And sometimes, if I listen too closely, I can hear breathing, like someone pressed right against the speaker waiting. Last night, the coordinates led right to my own apartment, and when I checked the alley below, the police tape was gone. But someone was standing there, looking up at my window, waiting. Every RadioShack had one. The old-school tabletop battery tester. Customers loved it because it gave them a sense of control. They'd bring in dead batteries, line them up like little soldiers, and wait for the machine to light up green or red. The one at our store sat permanently on the checkout counter, scratched and yellowed with age. It didn't even need to be plugged in. You'd slide the battery between the metal contacts, and the needle would swing to either full or empty. At least that's what it was supposed to do. I first noticed something was wrong on a Monday morning. I walked in, coffee in hand, and there it was, sitting idle on the counter, the display glowing bright green. Full. The problem was, no battery was inside it. I frowned, tapped the glass, and the light went out. I chalked it up to age. The thing was probably 30 years old, and I was sure it had more dust inside than wires. But the next morning, it was the same, and the morning after that. Always glowing, always reading full, even when it was empty. At first, the staff joked about it. "Guess it's testing ghosts," one guy said. Another swore it was haunted and refused to use it anymore. I tried to laugh along, but something about it unsettled me. One night, after we closed, I decided to test it myself. I dug into my backpack and pulled out 2 AA batteries from my flashlight. I slid the first one in. The needle swung hard to the right, glowing green, full. I slid in the second. Same result. I smirked. So it's broken. Figures. I turned to put the batteries away. That's when I noticed the screen flicker. The word full was gone. In its place, glowing faintly red, were words that had no business appearing on an old analog meter. "Your heart is next." I dropped the battery tester with a clatter, stumbling back so fast I nearly fell over. My heart thundered in my chest as I snatched up the machine. The screen was blank again. Just the usual, full, empty dial. I convinced myself I was seeing things. Stress, exhaustion, caffeine, take your pick. But then it happened again. A week later, a customer came in, carrying a handful of old C batteries. He asked if he could test them. "Sure," I said, sliding the tester across the counter. He popped the first battery in. The meter swung green, full. "Nice," he said, smiling. Then the display flickered. For a split second, instead of full, I saw another word, run. My throat went dry. I blinked, and the word was gone. "Guess they still work," the man said, pocketing his batteries. I forced a smile, but my hand shook as I pushed the tester aside. After that, I couldn't stop noticing it. Every time someone used it, there would be a flicker, sometimes just for a fraction of a second. A mother brought in a pack of batteries from her kids' toys. The tester lit up green, then flickered to the word HIDE. A man came in with a car battery adapter. The tester lit up red, then flickered to he knows. And once, when I tested one myself, the dial swung, buzzed faintly, and spelled out a name. My name. I wanted to throw it away, smash it, burn it. But every time I suggested replacing it, my manager shot me down. "Corporate says keep it," she said. "Customers love the damn thing. It's part of the brand." So I kept working the counter, trying not to look at it, until the night it went too far. It was a Friday. I was alone on closing shift, counting the register. The store was silent except for the hum of the fluorescents. Then, faintly, I heard a noise. Click, click. I looked up. The battery tester was turning on by itself. The display glowed bright green, then red, then green again. The needle jerked violently back and forth, clicking against the glass. I stood frozen, cash in hand, as the words flickered across the screen. Full, empty, full, empty. And then, suddenly, all the lights in the store went out. The display glowed alone in the darkness. "We see you." I don't know how long I stood there. My hands were shaking, the register drawer hanging open. Then, slowly, the tester began to buzz. Not the faint electrical hum it sometimes made, but a sound like breathing. Shallow, ragged. I backed away, my pulse hammering. The words on the display changed again. "Behind you." I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The aisles stretched out, empty and silent. But in the far corner of the store I saw movement. Something pale. It darted out of sight the moment my light hit it. I ran for the door, fumbling with my keys. My hands slipped, shaking too hard to find the lock. Behind me, the battery tester's buzzing grew louder, more frantic. The words on the display pulsed in the dark. Too late. I don't remember how I got home that night. The next morning, the store looked normal again. The tester sat quietly on the counter, the needle resting at 0. But when I walked past, I saw it flicker again. "Your heart is next." That was 2 weeks ago. Now I keep hearing the buzzing everywhere I go. In my apartment, in my car, even when I close my eyes at night. Last night, I woke up to a faint glow on my nightstand. The tester was there, waiting, and its display wasn't showing full or empty anymore. It was counting down from 3. When our manager quit, nobody was surprised. She'd been with the store for over a decade, and you could tell the place had worn her down. RadioShack wasn't what it used to be. Foot traffic was dead. Corporate kept slashing hours, and the aisles felt more like a museum than a store. Still, she left in a hurry. No farewell, no 2 weeks' notice. Just an email at 2 a.m. saying she wouldn't be coming back. That meant we had to clean out her office. The office was tiny, barely big enough for a desk, 2 filing cabinets, and a chair with a broken wheel. Most of it was empty. She'd already taken her framed photos and knickknacks. But the desk drawers were still locked. Our new acting manager tossed me the keys. Go through them. Shred anything old, file the rest. So I did. The top drawer had nothing but pens and dried-out markers. The middle drawer had some dusty manuals and outdated receipts. But the bottom drawer stuck. I tugged harder. The lock snapped with a crack, and inside, stacked neatly in rows, were Polaroid photos. Hundreds of them. At first, I thought they were just old staff party photos or customer giveaways. But as I lifted the first stack, I realized these weren't casual snapshots. Every photo was the same. An employee standing behind the counter staring straight at the camera. No smiles, no poses, just stiff, pale expressions like mugshots. I flipped through them quickly, recognizing faces. There was James, who'd transferred to another store last year. There was Leah, who'd quit months ago to go back to school. Even our manager, stern, unsmiling, her eyes flat. But the photos didn't look new. They looked aged, yellowed at the edges like they'd been taken years ago. And then I noticed something else. Some of the people in the photos had never worked here. I stopped on one image. A man with sunken eyes, wearing a brown jacket. His mouth was twisted into something between a grin and a grimace. His hands rested on the counter like he was about to lean forward. I had never seen him in my life. The next photo showed a woman with stringy hair and a pale face. She stood in the exact same spot. Photo after photo, strangers stared back at me. Always behind the counter, always stiff, lifeless. The hair on my arms prickled. I shoved the stack back into the drawer and slammed it shut. That night, I dreamed of the photos. I was behind the counter, a Polaroid camera clicking somewhere just out of sight. The flash blinded me, and when my vision cleared, I was staring at myself from inside the photo, frozen in glossy paper. I woke up drenched in sweat. The next day, I went back to the drawer. Curiosity burned in my chest. The photos were still there, but the one on top wasn't the same. It was new. Crisp, untouched by time. It was me, taken behind the counter the day before. My exact shirt, my exact posture, my breath caught. I hadn't posed for this. I hadn't seen anyone with a camera. The edges were still warm, like it had developed only minutes ago. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? But I started noticing the Polaroids more and more. Sometimes, when I closed the drawer, I swore I heard the faint click of a shutter. Sometimes, when I walked by the office, I caught the chemical whiff of photo paper developing. Once, while I was ringing up a customer, I saw the reflection of a flash in the dark TV screens across the aisle. When I turned, no one was there. But the next morning, a new photo was waiting in the drawer. Another one of me. The photos kept changing. The first ones just showed me standing still. Then came one of me looking over my shoulder. Then one of me frowning, like I'd heard something. And then one of me sleeping in my own bed. That broke me. I tore through the drawer, scattering the Polaroids across the office floor. Hundreds of faces stared up at me, employees and strangers alike. And near the bottom, I found a single blank photo. Except it wasn't blank. When I tilted it toward the light, faint outlines appeared. A shape, blurry but forming. The shape of me, holding the Polaroid. I begged the acting manager to let me throw the drawer out. I even offered to buy a new filing cabinet myself. He just shook his head. Corporate property. Leave it. So I left it, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, the dream came back. Only this time, the camera wasn't out of sight. It stood in front of me, old-fashioned and boxy, its lens wide and unblinking. The flash fired, and when the photo slid out, I saw myself, face twisted in terror, hand raised as if trying to block the shot. Then another photo slid out, and another. A never-ending stream, spilling across the floor, all of them showing me, each one worse than the last. My skin decaying, my eyes empty, my body crumpling to the ground. I woke screaming. The next morning, I refused to open the drawer. I told myself if I didn't look, it couldn't hurt me. But when I walked into the office, the drawer was already open, and on the desk, laid neatly in a row, were 3 Polaroids. The first showed me walking into the office. The second showed me standing at the desk, staring down at the photos. And the third showed me turning around. In the photo behind me, a figure stood in the doorway, tall, pale, grinning. I bolted from the office, slamming the door behind me. My coworkers stared as I grabbed my bag and left mid-shift. I haven't gone back since, but the Polaroids have. 2 nights ago, one slid out from under my apartment door. It showed me standing in my kitchen, taken from just behind my shoulder. Last night, another appeared on my nightstand. It showed me, curled in bed, eyes shut tight. And this morning, I woke to find one taped to my bathroom mirror. It was blank, but faintly in the right light, the outline was forming. Of me, screaming. When RadioShack finally announced our store was closing, none of us were surprised. Business had been dead for years, the shelves looking more like a junkyard than a retail store, and most of us were just waiting for the inevitable. The only shock was how sudden it was. Corporate sent an email saying we had 2 weeks to clear out the inventory and shut the doors forever. The days that followed were chaotic. Customers who hadn't stepped foot in a RadioShack in a decade suddenly appeared, scouring the aisles for clearance deals. They fought over outdated headphones, dug through boxes of yellowed cables, and filled carts with adapters no one had touched in years. The shelves emptied faster than I'd ever seen, and for once, we actually had lines at the register. It would have been funny if it didn't feel like vultures picking apart a carcass. For us employees, there was one silver lining: the discount. Normally, we got 10% off, but for the final days, corporate bumped it up to 50%. Half off whatever was left. People joked it was the only perk we'd ever gotten out of working there. At the time, I thought it was just their way of softening the blow. Later, I realized it wasn't kindness at all. It started late on a Thursday. The store was empty, and I stayed after close to grab a few things I didn't really need: a pair of headphones, some HDMI cables, an old portable speaker. I scanned them one by one, then swiped my employee badge. The register beeped, the receipt printer whirred, and paper began spilling out. I tore it off, expecting to see the subtotal and the discount applied. Instead, my stomach dropped. There were no items listed. The receipt said only one thing: discount applied. Life forfeited. It was printed in blocky text over and over again, line after line, all the way down the slip. I froze, staring at it, the hairs rising on my arms. My throat went dry. I crumpled it into a ball and tossed it in the trash, trying to convince myself it was just a glitch. The register system was ancient, and half the time the scanner barely worked. I tried again, scanning my badge once more. The printer shrieked and spat out another long receipt. Discount applied. Life forfeited. Over and over all the way down. I powered off the register, grabbed my bag, and left without buying anything. The next morning, I told myself not to mention it. I didn't want to sound crazy, but by midday my coworker Leah came up pale-faced, clutching a slip of paper. "Look at this," she whispered. Her receipt didn't list any items either. It said no refund, repeated again and again. She tried to laugh it off, but her voice shook. Later that day, Matt showed me his. His said voided. No return. He swore the lights above him flickered while it printed. We started comparing them in whispers like kids trading ghost stories. Every one of us had gotten one, each with different words, all unsettling. When we called corporate to report it, no one answered. Even our regional manager stopped replying. It was like the store had already been abandoned and we just hadn't left yet. That night, I stayed late again. Curiosity gnawed at me, outweighing fear. The aisles were bare, the shelves stripped, fluorescent bulbs buzzing faintly in the silence. I grabbed a pack of batteries, rang them up, and swiped my badge. The printer roared. Paper spilled out, curling across the counter. I grabbed the end, ready to see more words. But this time, it wasn't words. It was an image. A faint gray outline like a thermal scan of a person standing behind me. Tall, featureless, head tilted unnaturally. I spun around so fast the chair toppled. The store was empty, my chest hammered. When I looked back, the receipt was still printing. More images appeared. Me walking through the parking lot. Me unlocking my car. Me lying in my own bed. Each one stamped with the same phrase beneath, "Discount applied." I ripped the plug out of the wall. The register went dark. The printer stopped. I grabbed my bag and ran. That night, I dreamed of receipts. They poured endlessly from the register, winding around my ankles, climbing up my legs, wrapping my chest and throat until I couldn't breathe. The words glowed across the paper like fire, life forfeited. When I looked up, the register screen didn't show totals or discounts. It showed my full name, and next to it, a date, the date of my death. I woke gasping, sheets tangled tight around me like coils of paper. On the floor by my bed lay a crumpled receipt. I hadn't brought one home. By the weekend, the whole crew was rattled. Leah said her receipt started printing coordinates. Matt said his showed bank account numbers that matched his own. Even our acting manager got one. Hers read "Final Sale" over and over again. She didn't say a word, just tossed her badge on the counter and walked out without looking back. 3 nights before closing, I made the mistake of scanning my badge one last time. The printer screamed. Paper poured out like intestines, unrolling across the counter and onto the floor. I snatched it up, my heart pounding. This time, the image wasn't faint. It was crisp, clear. It showed me standing exactly where I was, bent over the printer, and behind me, so close I should have felt it, the figure leaned in, its blank face almost pressed against mine. The caption read, "Discount redeemed." I fled the store without locking the doors. I couldn't bring myself to go back. But the receipts weren't finished with me. The next morning, I found one taped to my apartment door. It showed me opening the same door, coffee in hand, exactly as I was in that moment. That evening, another receipt waited in my mailbox. It showed me sitting at my desk, head in my hands, staring at a blank wall. The following night, I woke to a faint crinkling sound. On my nightstand sat a strip of paper. This one didn't have an image, just 2 words. Tomorrow, 2:17. The final day came, and the store felt like a tomb. The shelves were empty, the windows papered over, the air thick with dust. We handed in our badges, signed the last forms, and shut off the lights. As I turned to leave, I saw the printer glowing one last time. Paper slid slowly from the machine, curling across the counter. I told myself not to look, but my eyes moved on their own. The words sharpened as the paper unrolled. No exchanges, no returns. Final sale. And at the bottom, stamped in red ink that looked wet, was my name. And the same date, I didn't tell anyone. What was the point? But last night at exactly 2:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of printing. Not from a register, from my bedroom. The paper was sliding from my dresser drawer, long and curling, spilling onto the floor. When I bent down and picked it up, the image made my blood run cold. It was me, standing there, clutching the receipt, eyes wide with terror. And just behind me, no longer featureless, the figure had a face. It was smiling. The universal remote was one of those items we could never get rid of. It sat on the clearance shelf for months, in a faded cardboard box, promising compatibility with hundreds of devices. Customers would pick it up, laugh about how clunky it looked compared to modern remotes, and put it back down. By the time our store was in its final weeks, the box was torn at the corners and half covered in dust. That's when a man bought it. He was older, wiry, wearing a faded jacket that hung off him like it didn't fit. He didn't say much, just set the box on the counter and watched me ring it up. I asked if he wanted batteries. He shook his head, paid in cash, left without another word. I thought nothing of it at the time. Just another clearance sale, another artifact, finally leaving our shelves. But a few nights later, he came back. It was close to closing. I was sweeping the front aisle when the bell above the door jingled. The man walked in, holding the box. Only this time, the remote wasn't inside. He walked up to the counter, set the empty box down, and looked at me. "It works," he said. His voice was flat, almost rehearsed. Then he smiled in a way that didn't feel like a smile at all, turned, and walked back out. I frowned, confused. He hadn't asked for a return. He hadn't asked for help. He'd just made sure I knew it worked. That night, I dreamed of the store. In the dream, I stood in front of the television wall, holding a remote in my hand. When I pressed a button, the lights flickered. Another button, and the doors unlocked. Another button, and the employees froze in place, their heads turning slowly toward me. I woke, drenched in sweat, the echo of static still in my ears. The next evening, I found the remote. It was sitting on the counter where the man had stood, even though I'd watched him take it out with him. The box was still gone, but the remote itself sat waiting, sleek black plastic gleaming faintly under the fluorescence. I picked it up cautiously. It was heavier than I expected, cold to the touch, as if it had been sitting in a freezer. The buttons were worn smooth, as though someone had pressed them thousands of times. I pointed it at the TV wall, half joking with myself, and pressed power. Every screen lit up at once. I frowned. Normally, they were all on separate loops, some working, some dead, but now every single one glowed in perfect unison, showing the same snowy static. I pressed another button. The lights overhead flickered, dimming until the aisles were swallowed in shadow. I pressed again. The automatic doors at the front opened and shut, slamming against their frames like jaws snapping. I laughed nervously, telling myself it was a coincidence. Maybe the circuits were wired together in some weird way, reacting to interference. But then I pressed one more button. The employees froze. Leah was restocking batteries. Matt was breaking down boxes. Both of them stopped mid-motion, their heads lifting slowly, eyes locking on me. I panicked, hitting buttons at random. The lights flickered, the doors banged open and closed. The TVs cycled through channels of static and grainy images. But Leah and Matt didn't move. They just stared. Finally, I dropped the remote. The moment it hit the counter, they blinked, shook their heads, and went back to work like nothing had happened. "You okay?" Leah asked, glancing at me. I forced a laugh, nodding quickly. Yeah, just thought I saw a spider. But inside, my heart was pounding. I should have thrown the remote away right then, smashed it to pieces. Instead, I slid it under the counter. That night, I dreamed again. This time, I stood in my apartment, the remote in my hand. When I pressed a button, my neighbors froze mid-step in the hallway. Another button, and the lights in their units went dark. Another button, and their eyes turned toward me, blank and glassy. I woke with a scream, the sheets soaked with sweat. On my nightstand sat the remote. I know I hadn't taken it home. The next day at work, I tried to tell Matt. He laughed, said I was working too many closing shifts, and reminded me the store only had a week left anyway. "You'll be free of this dump soon," he said. But the remote didn't care about my schedule. That night, the TVs turned on by themselves. Every single one. I came out of the stockroom to find them glowing in the dark, showing not static this time, but footage of the store. Grainy, distorted security feeds from angles that didn't exist. One screen showed the front counter. Another showed the break room. Another showed the parking lot. And one showed me, standing exactly where I was, staring at the screens. I backed away slowly, refusing to blink, refusing to turn my head. On the screen, my reflection didn't match me. The other version of me raised the remote and pressed a button. The lights above me flickered and died. The store plunged into darkness. I dropped my broom and bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock. My keys slipped through my shaking hands. Behind me, the static of the televisions roared, rising into a deafening chorus. When I finally forced the door open, I didn't look back. The next morning, the remote was waiting for me on the counter. No matter where I left it, no matter how far I ran, it always came back. I tried locking it in the safe, burying it under boxes, even throwing it in the dumpster. By closing time, it was always back on the counter, heavy and cold, buttons worn smooth. Leah noticed me staring at it once. "Why don't you just take it home?" she asked. "Nobody's gonna miss it." I shook my head quickly. "I don't want it." But I already had it. That night, I woke to the sound of static. My apartment was filled with the faint glow of televisions, though I owned only one. The screens flickered across every wall, showing me sleeping from dozens of angles, as if cameras had been hidden all around. I sat up slowly. On the nightstand, the remote pulsed faintly with light. When I reached for it, my body moved on its own. My thumb hovered over the red power button. And then, against every instinct, I pressed it. The screens went black. But I wasn't alone in the room anymore. The glow from the remote cast just enough light for me to see the outline of figures. Dozens of them surrounding my bed. Their faces were blank, their bodies still, their eyes fixed on me. The remote slipped from my hand, clattering to the floor. The figures didn't move. They just waited. And then, in unison, they lifted their hands, mimicking the motion of holding remotes of their own. I screamed, scrambling back, hitting the lamp switch. The room filled with light. I was alone. But the remote was still on the floor, and the red power button glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. I don't touch it anymore. I try not to look at it. But sometimes when the lights flicker in my apartment or when the TV turns on by itself, I know it's waiting. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I feel my body freeze, unable to move, as if someone else is pressing a button somewhere. The universal remote doesn't just control devices. It controls us. And I don't know how many more presses I have left before I'm permanently switched off.